Throughout history, countless powerful civilizations have risen, only to vanish without a trace. Their monuments lie in ruins, their languages lost, and their secrets buried beneath the sands of time. Who were the Garamantes? What became of the kingdom of Punt? And why did mighty empires like Srivijaya, Sogdia, and the Shire dynasty disappear so mysteriously? Today, we explore the forgotten legacies of 40 ancient kingdoms, some erased by war, others by time itself. These aren't just lost civilizations, they're unsolved mysteries of our world. So join us on this haunting journey, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The Garamantes beneath the blazing sun of the Sahara, in what is now southwest Libya, an ancient civilization once thrived, forgotten by time, yet far ahead of its own. These were the Garamantes. For centuries, historians believed the Sahara was an impassable wasteland in antiquity. But deep beneath the dunes, archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of vast fortified cities, underground irrigation systems, and tombs belonging to a people who once commanded a sophisticated desert kingdom. From around 500 BCE to 700 CE, the Garamantes built a flourishing society in one of Earth's harshest environments. Their cities like Garama, the capital, were not mirages, but bustling centers with multi-story buildings and streets. Even more astonishing was their mastery of water. Using a network of underground channels called fogueras, they tapped into fossil aquifers, bringing life to the desert and growing crops in arid soil. The Garamantes were traders, warriors, and engineers. Roman sources feared them as fierce raiders, on horse-drawn chariots, vanishing into the sands after swift attacks. And yet, despite contact with both Rome and Carthage, they left behind no written records of their own. Why did they vanish? As the water tables dropped and their lifeline dried up, the Garamantes faded from history, leaving behind ruins, bones, and a silence that echoes beneath the desert winds. But somewhere beneath the sand, their secrets may still be waiting. The Aksumite Empire, rising from the highlands of what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. The Aksumite Empire was once one of the great powers of the ancient world, yet its legacy remains strangely obscured. From the 1st to the 7th century CE, Aksum stood at the crossroads of Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean. It controlled trade routes that stretched from Rome to India, exporting gold, ivory, incense, and even African elephants. At its peak, Aksum minted its own coins in gold and silver, an unmistakable mark of a powerful and independent civilization. Capital Aksum was a marvel of engineering and ambition. Towering obelisks carved from single slabs of granite, some standing over 70 feet tall, still pierce the skies today. Silent monuments to an empire that claimed descent from the Queen of Sheba herself. Aksum was also one of the earliest major empires to officially adopt Christianity, doing so in the 4th century, even before much of Europe. Its churches, many carved directly into the mountains, remain among the oldest in the world. And yet, this once glorious empire began to retreat from history. Shifting trade routes, rising Islamic powers along the Red Sea, and ecological decline slowly dimmed its light. Today, Aksum's ruins still stand, weathered, massive, and mysterious, but many of its royal tombs remain unexcavated, and its full story, perhaps, has yet to be told. The kingdom of Zimbabwe, high on the southeastern plateau of Africa, lies a forgotten legacy, one built not of myth, but of stone. This is the story of the kingdom of Zimbabwe. From the 11th to the 15th century, a powerful African civilization rose in what is now modern-day Zimbabwe. At its heart stood Great Zimbabwe, a vast city of granite walls, towers, and enclosures crafted without mortar, yet standing for centuries. Some of its walls rise over 30 feet high, curving with precision and purpose, enclosing the secrets of a once thriving royal court. The Kingdom of Zimbabwe controlled trade across southern Africa, connecting the goldfields of the interior to the ports of the Swahili coast. From there, goods traveled across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, India, and even China. Archaeologists have found Persian ceramics, Chinese porcelain, and Arab coins, all in a land once thought to be isolated. But for centuries, European colonists dismissed the site's African origins, claiming such architecture could not have been built by native hands. It wasn't until the 20th century that scholars finally recognized the truth. Great Zimbabwe was built by African kings, stone by stone. Over generations, what led to the kingdom's decline remains uncertain. Perhaps environmental strain, political shifts, or the redirection of trade routes. The city was eventually abandoned, its stone walls left to the wind and time. Yet those silent ruins still stand, a testament to ingenuity, power, and forgotten pride, inviting us to look closer and ask what other histories have been buried in plain sight. The Punt. For thousands of years, ancient Egyptian texts spoke of a distant, fabled land, the land of Punt, a place of riches, incense, exotic animals, and gold. But despite its prominence in royal records, no one today knows exactly where it was. The earliest accounts date back to Egypt's 5th dynasty. Around 2500 BCE, pharaohs launched maritime expeditions to Punt, calling it God's Land. In vivid reliefs at the Temple of Hatshepsut in Luxor, ships are shown returning with baboons, myrrh trees, ebony, and electrum treasures not found in Egypt itself. Unlike mere trade partners, Punt was described with reverence. Its rulers, terrain, and dwellings were carefully carved into temple walls, suggesting both wealth and diplomacy. Some scholars believe Punt lay in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. Others suggest southern Arabia, but no definitive archaeological site has ever been found. The enigma deepens with the goods themselves. DNA analysis of mummified baboons in Egyptian tombs points toward the Horn of Africa, yet no port, palace, or ruin has confirmed the exact location of Punt. Was it a real kingdom, or a shifting trade network across coasts and cultures, a fixed land, or a memory preserved through myth, until evidence rises from the earth or the sea? The land of Punt remains suspended between history and legend, half seen through the fog of time, calling out from the edge of the known world. The Himyarite kingdom in the arid highlands of ancient Yemen. Long before Islam shaped the region, a powerful kingdom rose and fell. The Himyarite kingdom, from around 110 BCE to 525 CE. The Himyarites ruled much of southern Arabia. Their capital, Zafar, perched on the mountain ridges, controlled vital incense, root straightening, frankincense, and myrrh, two of the ancient world's most prized commodities. These fragrant resins made their way to Rome, India, and beyond, enriching the kingdom and drawing foreign attention. The Himyarites were skilled in both diplomacy and war, balancing relations with great powers like Rome, Persia, and Abyssinia. At the height of their influence, they absorbed neighboring kingdoms like Saba, uniting much of South Arabia under a single rule. But the Himyarite story is not just one of trade and politics, it's also a story of shifting faith. By the 4th century CE, the kingdom adopted Judaism as its state religion, setting it apart in a region dominated by polytheism and later Christianity. This bold move brought both alliances and enemies. Tensions with Christian neighbors escalated, and conflict became inevitable. In the early 6th century, an Abyssinian invasion supported by the Byzantine Empire toppled the Himyarite rulers. The kingdom fell, and with it, an era ended. Today, traces of their temples, inscriptions, and mountain cities still lie buried beneath dust and time. And yet, the full depth of the Himyarite legacy remains largely untold, a chapter half remembered, waiting in silence beneath the stones of Yemen. The Sogdians skated across the windswept valleys of Central Asia. Between deserts and mountain passes lived a people whose name has nearly faded from memory, yet their influence stretched from Rome to China. They were the Sogdians, flourishing between the 6th century BCE and the 11th century CE. The Sogdians were not an empire, but a network of civilization woven into the fabric of the Silk Road. Their cities, like Samarkand and Bukhara, became vibrant hubs of trade, culture, and diplomacy. Sogdian merchants carried silk, glass, paper, spices, and ideas, moving not just goods, but beliefs and languages across thousands of miles. They were master negotiators and polyglots, fluent in Persian, Chinese, Sanskrit, and more. In the bustling caravanserais of the Silk Road, Sogdians served as interpreters, scribes, and storytellers, bridging east and west with quiet persistence. Though they never ruled a vast empire, their art, religion, and writing reveal a richly layered culture. Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Christianity, and later Islam all passed through their lands, leaving traces in temples and manuscripts. In China's 10th dynasty, Sogdian dancers, musicians, and merchants became a familiar presence at the imperial court, but over time, their identity was slowly absorbed by Islamic conquests, Mongol invasions, and the shifting sands of history. By the 11th century, The distinct Sogdian language and traditions had nearly disappeared, and yet, along ancient roads, in dusty archives, and on faded murals in desert caves, the legacy of the Sogdians lingers, quiet, nomadic, and forgotten, but never truly gone. The Tocharians in the remote basins of western China, far from the great imperial capitals, archaeologists uncovered a mystery that challenged everything we thought we knew about the ancient Silk Road. Hidden beneath the sands of the Tarim Basin were the Tocharians, flourishing between 1800 BCE and 700 CE. The Tocharians were an Indo-European people light-haired, often tall, and strikingly distinct from their East Asian neighbors. Their perfectly preserved mummies, found in the arid deserts of Xinjiang, wore colorful woolen clothing, tartan-like patterns, and leather boots, suggesting a culture more akin to ancient Europeans than to the surrounding Chinese dynasties. But it wasn't just their appearance that stood out. The Tocharians spoke an Indo-European language in a unique script adapted from Indian Brahmi. Their two main dialects, Tocharian A and B, are some of the easternmost known branches of the Indo-European language family. They left behind religious texts, Buddhist manuscripts, and artistic frescoes, many discovered in ancient temples along the Silk Road. How did they get there? No one knows for certain. Some theories suggest a westward migration of steppe tribes thousands of years ago. Others point to isolated development in the Tarim region itself. What's clear is that the Tocharians were not wanderers but builders of cities, traders, and carriers of Buddhist thought across Asia. By the 9th century, their culture had vanished, absorbed by waves of Turkic and Uighur migrations. Yet in the dry desert silence, the fabrics, languages, and faces of the Tocharians endure a forgotten thread in the great tapestry of human history, waiting still to be fully unraveled. The Bactrians in the rugged heart of Central Asia, between the towering Hindu Kush and the fertile Oxus River, lay an ancient kingdom whose influence rippled through empires. These were the Bactrians, masters of a land both contested and culturally rich. Bactria first emerged in the 2nd millennium BCE, but its true prominence began during the Achaemenid Empire, when it became a vital satrapy under Persian rule. After Alexander the Great's conquest in the 4th century BCE, Bactria transformed, again becoming a Hellenistic kingdom where Greek and Eastern traditions fused in unexpected ways. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom, as it came to be known, was unlike anything the ancient world had seen. Greek-style cities rose in Afghan valleys. Coins bore images of Hellenistic gods alongside Eastern motifs, and Buddhist monasteries appeared just beyond classical colonnades. It was here that the seeds of Greco-Buddhism were sown, an artistic and philosophical blend that would later shape Buddhist imagery across Asia. Yet Bactria was also a crossroads for ambition. It was invaded, divided, absorbed by Parthians, Kushans, and eventually the expanding Islamic caliphates. Each left their mark on the land, even as the original Bactrian language slowly faded from use. Today, scattered ruins and forgotten inscriptions remain silent witnesses to a civilization that bridged East and West long before the modern world imagined such a thing. And as archaeologists continue to unearth the lost cities of Bactria, a question lingers in the dust. How much of our shared history still lies buried beneath the crossroads of empire? The Yuezhi, long before the rise of the Silk Road as we know it, a nomadic people roamed the grasslands of western China, only to be swept westward by conflict, and in their journey, changed the course of history. These were the Yuezhi first mentioned. In Chinese records around the 2nd century BCE, the Yuezhi lived near the Gansu corridor, alongside early trade routes. But their fate took a dramatic turn when they were attacked and displaced by the rising Zhonyu Confederation. Forced from their homeland, the Yuezhi migrated westward across Central Asia, slow, generational movement that would eventually reshape entire regions. By the 1st century BCE, the Yuezhi had settled in Bactria, what is now northern Afghanistan. There, they overthrew the remnants of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom and established a new power, the Kushan Empire. Under Kushan rule, the legacy of the Yuezhi flourished. They became patrons of Buddhism, facilitating its spread along the Silk Road. Their empire stretched from Central Asia to northern India, connecting cultures and faiths across vast distances. Kushan kings issued coins in Greek, Prakrit, and Bactrian, and sponsored Buddhist art that blended Hellenistic and Indian forms, images that would eventually shape Buddhist iconography from China to Japan. And yet, the Yuezhi themselves left no written records in their own voice. What we know comes from the ruins of cities, coins, sculptures and the observations of others. From nomadic beginnings to imperial legacy, the Yuezhi remain a people defined by movement, transition, and silence, a quiet force that helped shape the spiritual and cultural landscape of Asia, then vanished into the folds of time. The Zhonyuin, the vast open steppes north of the Great Wall. Long before the rise of Genghis Khan, there emerged a confederation of fierce horsemen who would challenge one of the world's greatest empires. These were the Xiongnu, first appearing in Chinese records around the 3rd century BCE. The Xiongnu were a powerful nomadic federation that unified under a single ruler known as the Chanyu. With swift cavalry, deep knowledge of the land, and mobile warfare, they posed a constant threat to China's northern frontier, prompting the Qin and Han dynasties to begin construction and expansion of the Great Wall. At their height, the Zhou controlled a vast territory stretching from Manchuria to Central Asia. They dominated trade routes and demanded tribute from the Han Empire, forcing emperors into uneasy diplomacy. Some Han princesses were even sent in marriage alliances, hoping to secure peace through kinship. Yet their society remains elusive. The Xiongnu left no written language. What survives are clues, burial mounds filled with horse gear, weapons, and ornaments made of gold and jade, evidence of both wealth and mobility. Genetic studies hint at a complex, multi-ethnic makeup, blending East Asian and Indo-European traits. By the 1st century CE, internal divisions and external pressures weakened the confederation. Some Xiongnu groups moved westward, possibly becoming part of the mysterious Huns who later terrorized Europe. Were they the ancestors of later empires, or merely a chapter in the long history of the steppe? The winds of the Mongolian plains still whisper their name, but the full story of the Xiongnu remains scattered like dust across the grasslands. The Gikid Turkshai in the Central Asian steppes, where the mountains meet the sky and the grasslands stretch to the horizon. A new power rose in the 6th century CIA, confederation of clans, united not by blood, but by a shared name and vision. These were the Gktrks, the Celestial Turks, emerging around 552 CE. The Gktrks were the first known Turkic people to unify much of Inner Asia under a single banner. They overthrew the Rouran Khaganate and quickly established the vast Turkic Khaganate, stretching from the borders of China to the Caspian Sea. With their mobile cavalry, iron weaponry, and sophisticated tribal diplomacy, the Gktrks dominated trade routes and controlled vital stretches of the Silk Road. But they were not simply raiders or warlords. The Gktrks left behind the Orkan inscriptions, epic stone monuments carved in Old Turkic script, some of the earliest evidence of a written Turkic language. These inscriptions, located in modern-day Mongolia, speak of lost glory, betrayal, and unity, offering a rare first-hand voice from the steppe. Their power, however, was fragile. The empire eventually split into eastern and western khanates, both plagued by internal rivalry and pressure from Tang China. By the 8th century, the Gktrk Empire had crumbled, absorbed into rising powers, and scattered across the steppe. Yet, the legacy of the Gktrks endured. They laid the cultural and political foundation for later Turkic empires, from the Seljuks to the Ottomans, and in the windswept valleys of Mongolia, their stone voices still stand speaking across the centuries. From the heart of the steppe, the Khazars between the Black Sea and the Caspian, across the windswept steppes of the Caucasus, rose a kingdom that bridged east and west, Christian and Muslim, Turkic nomads and imperial diplomats. This was the Khazar Khaganate Empire, born of trade, strategy, and mystery, emerging in the 7th century CE after the collapse of the Western Gktrk Khaganate. The Khazars carved out a powerful realm in what is now southern Russia and Ukraine. They commanded key trade routes linking Byzantium, the Islamic Caliphates, and the Viking Rus. Their capital, Itil, stood along the Volga River, bustling with merchants, warriors, and emissaries from 3 continents. But what sets the Khazars apart in history is a singular and still debated decision. Their ruling elite adopted Judaism sometime in the 8th or 9th century. The Khazar nobility and, perhaps the Khagan himself, converted, choosing a faith that placed them politically between the Christian Byzantine Empire and the Muslim Caliphate. This move was both spiritual and strategic, aligning the Khazars with neither of the 2 great religious powers that surrounded them. Despite this unique identity, the Khazar state was pragmatic, multi-ethnic, and religiously diverse. Muslims, Christians, Jews, and pagans lived under Khazar rule, often judged in their own legal traditions. By the 10th century, however, pressure from the Rus and internal decline brought the Khaganate to an end. Its cities fell, and its people dispersed, leaving behind only fragments of their story, and so the Khazars faded from history, their legacy obscured by myth, silence, and speculation. But their brief, brilliant existence still raises questions that echo through the corridors of early medieval history, questions that remain unanswered to this day. The kingdom of Funan along the marshy shores of the lower Mekong River, long before the rise of Angkor or the temples of Thailand. There flourished a kingdom that became Southeast Asia's first great maritime power. This was the kingdom of Funan. Emerging around the 1st century CE, Funan was not a land of towering monuments, but of bustling port cities and riverine trade. Chinese records describe it as a sophisticated and prosperous realm, ruled by kings, adorned with gold, and connected to distant lands. From its heartlands in modern-day Cambodia and southern Vietnam, Funan controlled key trade routes that linked India, China, and the wider Indian Ocean world. Indian influence was especially strong. Sanskrit inscriptions, Hindu deities, and early Buddhist relics suggest a kingdom deeply shaped by Indian culture. But this was no mere imitation. Funan absorbed foreign ideas and made them its own, blending them with indigenous traditions in art, architecture, and belief. Funan cities, though largely buried or eroded, hint at a complex society, with canals, moated settlements, and an early form of writing. Its economy thrived on trade in spices, gemstones, and forest products, drawing merchants from across Asia. By the 6th century CE, however, Funan began to decline, possibly due to shifting trade patterns, internal strife, or the rise of rival powers like Chen-La. The kingdom faded into the shadows, its name preserved only in foreign texts and scattered ruins. And yet, beneath the soil and along the old riverbanks, the story of Funan still lingers, a quiet foundation for the great civilizations that would follow. The Srivijaya Empire, hidden beneath layers of jungle and time, along the waterways of maritime Southeast Asia, lay a powerful thalassocratic empire that once ruled the Seziet, left behind no great monuments, and for centuries remained nearly forgotten. This was the Srivijaya Empire, from the 7th to the 13th century CE. Srivijaya dominated trade through the Strait of Malacca, one of the most vital maritime passages in the ancient world. Centered in present-day Sumatra, it controlled key choke points between China and India, collecting tribute, guiding merchant fleets, and spreading culture across island and mainland Southeast Asia. Unlike land-based empires, Srivijaya's power flowed through its ports. Archaeological finds in places like Palembang reveal traces of Buddhist stupas, Chinese ceramics, and Sanskrit inscriptions, all signs of a cosmopolitan hub thriving on commerce and diplomacy. The empire embraced Mahayana Buddhism and became a renowned center of learning, drawing pilgrims from as far as China, including the famed monk Yijing. Yet, no stone palaces or enduring temples remain. Much of what we know comes from foreign records, Chinese annals, Arab geographies, and scattered inscriptions found across the region. Its capital may still lie buried beneath silt and urban sprawl, undiscovered. By the 13th century, Srivijaya faded, overtaken by rivals and shifting trade routes. Its ships disappeared from the straits, its name from memory. But the sea does not forget so easily, and somewhere in the silence of submerged harbors and forested ruins, the full story of Srivijaya may still be waiting to rise again. The Kampa Kingdom, the central coast of what is now Vietnam. Between the mountains and the sea, rose a kingdom shaped by wind, water, and war. This was Kampa, maritime civilization, both resilient and enigmatic. From as early as the 2nd century CE, Champa emerged as a series of city-states stretching along the coast. Influenced heavily by Indian culture, the Kam people adopted Sanskrit, built Hindu temples, and worshipped deities like Shiva and Vishnu. Their sacred towers, constructed from red brick without mortar, still stand today. Weathered but defiant, high above the waves, Kampa's economy thrived on sea trade. Its ports welcomed merchants from China, India, and the Islamic world. Spices, ivory, sandalwood, and textiles flowed through its harbors, enriching a society known for its artistry, sculpture, and dance. But life in Campa was marked by constant tension. The kingdom often clashed with its northern neighbor, Viet, and fought to maintain independence against both regional powers and external empires, sometimes allied, often at war. Campa's borders shifted with the tides of history. By the 15th century, after centuries of conflict and gradual encroachment, Campa's power crumbled. Its last remnants were absorbed or driven south, its temples left to the jungles and time. Yet traces of Champa survive in language, architecture, and the living traditions of the Cam people, who still call parts of Vietnam and Cambodia home. And, as archaeologists unearth more from beneath the soil and stone, one question remains: how much of Campa's true legacy still lies hidden, just beyond the shore? The Dvaravati civilization in the fertile river plains of central Thailand, long before the rise of Thai kingdoms or the spires of Ayutthaya. A quieter, lesser-known civilization flourished rooted in faith, trade, and cultural fusion. This was the Dvaravati civilization, emerging around the 6th century CE and lasting into the 11th. Dvaravati was not a centralized kingdom, but a network of loosely connected city-state-states, centered on Buddhist ritual and urban life. At the heart of these cities stood brick stupas, stone pillars, and intricately carved Buddha images, revealing a deep devotion to Theravada Buddhism. Indian influence ran deep, yet what developed here was uniquely Southeast Asian in form and spirit. Archaeological finds in sites like Nakornpatham and Yuthong reveal urban planning, coinage, and inscriptions in Sanskrit and Pali. Dvaravati, artisans left behind elegant Dharmachakra stone, wheels of law, and scenes from Jataka tales, carved in Their ceramics and jewelry show signs of long-distance trade, connecting them to India, Sri Lanka, and even China. But despite its cultural richness, Dvaravati left no written records of its own political structure or rulers. Its decline is equally unclear, perhaps a result of external conquest, the rise of the Khmer Empire, or internal transformation as new powers emerged. Today, only mounds, ruins, and fragments remain quiet evidence of a Buddhist civilization that once shaped the spiritual landscape of early Southeast Asia. And as new discoveries continue to emerge from beneath the rice fields and riverbanks, Dvaravati invites us to look beyond empires and into the gentle heart of early belief and cultural exchange. The Khmer Empire in the mist-covered jungles of Southeast Asia, where colossal stone faces gaze out from ancient towers. The ruins of a once mighty empire still whisper stories of power, devotion, and mystery. This was the Khmer Empire, rising in the 9th century CE and enduring for over 600 years. The Khmer Empire ruled over much of modern-day Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and southern Vietnam. Its capital, Angkor, became one of the largest and most sophisticated urban centers in the pre-industrial world, home to vast reservoirs, canals, highways, and monumental temples. At the heart of this civilization stood Angkor Wat, a breathtaking temple complex built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II, originally dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. It later embraced Buddhist symbolism, reflecting the spiritual evolution of the empire itself. Carvings of gods, demons, and celestial dancers stretch for miles across its sandstone walls, etched with both myth and memory. But the grandeur of the Khmer Empire extended beyond its temples. It developed an intricate system of water management barrages and canals that sustained agriculture through seasonal extremes and supported a booming population. Yet despite its achievements, the empire eventually declined. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned. The reasons remained debated: environmental shifts, internal conflict, foreign invasions, or perhaps a slow unraveling of a complex society. Today, the jungle reclaims what stone cannot resist. But the spirit of the Khmer Empire endures, not just in the ruins of Angkor, but in the rhythms of Khmer culture and the unanswered questions that still echo through its silent corridors. The Pew city-states scattered across the dry plains of what is now central Myanmar, a constellation of ancient cities once shimmered with the rhythms of early Southeast Asian civilization. These were the Pew city-states' serene centers of trade, faith, and cultural exchange that flourished quietly for over 1,000 years, from as early as the 2nd century BCE to around the 9th century CE. The Pew people built walled cities like Sri Ketra, Baekthano, and Halin urban centers far ahead of their time. At their height, these city-states were adorned with Buddhist stupas, brick monasteries, and inscriptions in both Pyu and Pali, pointing to their deep embrace of Theravada Buddhism and their ties to Indian cultural and religious traditions. The Pyu were not empire builders. Instead, they cultivated a network of self-governing city-states, united more by faith and trade than by conquest. They minted coins, traded with India and China, and developed irrigation systems that sustained agriculture in the semi-arid landscape. Chinese envoys described the Pyu as peaceful, music-loving people who lived in harmony with their neighbors. Yet by the 9th century, their story fades. The rise of the Nanzhao kingdom in the north, combined with internal shifts and the emergence of new powers like the pagan kingdom, slowly drew the curtain on Pyu prominence. Today, the remnants of their cities lie in quiet fields, mounds, bricks, and broken stupas, many still unexplored. But the Pyu left a gentle imprint on Myanmar's cultural DNA. And as new excavations continue, the question lingers: how much more of Southeast Asia's early identity lies buried beneath the stillness of the Pyu Plains? The Ryukyu kingdom isolated in the blue waters between Japan, China, and Southeast Asia. The Ryukyu kingdom rose as a maritime bridge between worlds, a small island realm with an outsized role in East Asian history. Established in the 15th century and centered on Okinawa, the Ryukyu kingdom unified a chain of islands that had once been divided among rival chieftains. Under the first dynasty, it grew into a thriving seafaring state, sleek ships sailing to Korea, Siam, the Philippines, and beyond. The kingdom became a vital node in regional trade, exchanging Chinese silks, Southeast Asian spices, and Japanese silver. But Ryukyu was more than a merchant state. It cultivated a distinct culture blending Chinese Confucian ideals, Japanese court customs, and indigenous island traditions. Its capital, Shuri, stood adorned with red palace walls, stone pathways, and tiled roofs that bore the kingdom's unique identity. Ryukyuan music, dance, and textiles flourished, subtle, refined, and quietly distinct from its more powerful neighbors. The kingdom maintained an unusual diplomatic balance, paying tribute to Ming and Qing China, while later becoming a vassal of Japan's Satsuma domain. It navigated two worlds, carefully both subservient and sovereign. But by the late 19th century, that balance collapsed. Japan annexed the kingdom in 1879, transforming it into Okinawa Prefecture. The royal line ended, and with it, centuries of careful diplomacy and cultural independence. Yet traces of the Ryukyu kingdom remain in language, in ritual, and in memory. And somewhere between the tides of history and the winds of the Pacific, its story still whispers, waiting to be fully heard. The Bun dynasty, long before the rise of imperial courts and stone citadels. In the misty dawn of Southeast Asian history, there lived a people who would come to call themselves the Viet. Their rulers, shrouded in legend and memory, formed what is known today as the Honbong dynasty, Vietnam's earliest recorded dynasty, and perhaps its most mysterious. Said to have begun around 2879 BCE, the Bum period is traced through myth and oral tradition, more than through archaeological certainty. The dynasty was founded by King Daijong Vibang, a semi-divine figure believed to be the ancestor of all Vietnamese people. His lineage continued through generations of kings, each presiding over the ancient kingdom of Van Lang. These early kings ruled not from palaces, but from stilt houses along rivers, governing over a society of farmers, fishers, and bronze workers. The Red River Delta, with its fertile floodplains, became the cradle of Vietnamese civilization. Here, the people cultivated wet rice, cast intricate bronze drums, and honored the spirits of mountains, rivers, and ancestors. But the Hunbong dynasty exists at the crossroads of history and legend. Chinese sources mention the lords and the Red River kingdoms, yet offer only fragments. No written records from the dynasty itself survive, only folktales, ancient customs, and ritual practices that echo through Vietnamese culture even today. By the 3rd century BC, the dynasty faded into obscurity, giving way to new powers and foreign conquest. And yet, the kings remain enshrined, not just in national memory, but in annual festivals and whispered prayers, a legacy have remembered, but never quite forgotten. The Shaya dynasty before the Shang. before the oracle bones and bronze vessels. There was the Shire dynasty spoken of in legend, recorded in ancient chronicles, but still debated by historians today. Said to be China's first dynasty, the Shire marks the hazy boundary between myth and history. According to traditional accounts, the Xia dynasty was founded around 2070 BCE by Yu the Great, a hero celebrated for taming the catastrophic floods of the Yellow River. Instead of using force, Yu redirected the waters through a complex system of canals and engineering feat that earned him the mandate to rule. His dynasty would span nearly 5 centuries, passing power from father to son, a shift from tribal alliances to hereditary kingship. Ancient texts like the Bamboo Annals and records of the Grand Historian describe a line of 17 kings, vast territories, and early statecraft. Yet for centuries, there was no physical evidence to support their existence, only words etched into scrolls and echoed in ritual that began to change in the 20th century. Archaeologists unearthed the Erlitou culture in Henan province, a Bronze Age society with palatial buildings, bronze tools, and signs of social stratification. Could this be the SIA? The evidence is suggestive but inconclusive. No inscriptions bear the name Shire, and the link remains theoretical. So the Shire dynasty stands suspended, perhaps real, perhaps an origin myth to justify later rule, a foundational story written not just in soil and stone, but in the very imagination of a civilization still trying to remember how it all began. The Shang dynasty, beneath the plains of northern China, a forgotten script emerged etched into bone and shell, whispering the name of a dynasty once thought to be legend. The Shang, long regarded as China's first historically verified dynasty, the Shang ruled from around 1600 to 1046 BCE for centuries. Knowledge of their existence came only from ancient texts, like the records of the Grand Historian. But in the late 19th century, farmers digging near Enyang uncovered strange oracle bones, animal scapulae, and turtle plastrons marked with carved characters. These turned out to be the earliest known form of Chinese writing, used for divination during the Shang reign. Archaeological excavations revealed much more: massive city walls, ritual altars, and tombs filled with bronze vessels, jade ornaments, and even sacrificial victims. At the heart of it all was a complex society ruled by a line of warrior kings who claimed divine authority through ancestor worship and celestial communication. The Shang were pioneers in bronze metallurgy. Their weapons and ceremonial tools were not only technologically advanced but richly symbolic. Their capital at Yingsu thrived as a center of ritual, warfare, and trade, yet it eventually fell to the rising Zhou, who would cast the Shang as tyrants in decline. But even in defeat, the Shang left their mark. Their written language became the foundation of Chinese script. Their rituals shaped centuries of belief, and their bones still speak. What else lies buried beneath layers of soil and silence, waiting the questions we haven't yet learned to ask? The kingdom of Shuhai in the mist-covered valleys of what is now Sichuan. Legends speak of a mysterious kingdom that flourished beyond the reach of China's earliest dynasties, an enigmatic realm known as the Kingdom of Shu. For centuries, Shu existed more in myth than in historical record. Ancient texts hinted at its presence, but it wasn't until the 1980s that hard evidence emerged deep beneath the soil of Sanxing Dui. There, archaeologists uncovered a trove of artifacts unlike anything found in traditional Chinese sites. Enormous bronze masks with exaggerated eyes, towering trees cast in metal, and jade objects carved with unfamiliar motifs. These discoveries stunned the academic world. The artifacts suggested a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization thriving as early as 1200 BC, contemporaneous with the Shang dynasty, but culturally distinct. The Shu people, it seemed, practiced rituals centered around nature, the cosmos, and possibly ancestor spirits, using symbols that remain undeciphered to this day. The sheer scale of the bronze works, some weighing hundreds of pounds, raises questions about how such a society developed independently in mountainous isolation. Who were these artisans and priests? What cosmology guided their creations? And why, after centuries of innovation, did the Shu vanish? The kingdom of Shu eventually became part of the Qin Empire's expansion, and much of its memory faded into obscurity. Yet its silent bronze faces continue to stare out from museum glass, daring us to decode a forgotten worldview, somewhere in the shadows of Sichuan's past. an ancient voice still waits to be heard. The Ba Kingdom in the mountainous heart of ancient Sichuan. Long before the rise of China's imperial power, there existed a kingdom veiled in myth and mystery, the Ba Kingdom. First mentioned in ancient Chinese chronicles over 3,000 years ago. The Ba were described as fierce warriors, tribal confederations bound by shifting alliances and a unique cultural identity. But for centuries, their world remained largely lost, overshadowed by the better documented histories of neighboring states like Shu and Q. That began to change with archaeological finds in sites such as Chongqing and the Three Gorges region. Bronze drums, ritual weapons, and serpent-shaped ornaments began to paint a picture of a people who revered music, warfare, and spiritual ceremony. Distinct from the cultures of the Central Plains, the Ba favored unusual bronze design short swords, tiger motifs, and instruments that suggest music played a key role in religious life. Yet much about the Ba remains uncertain. Their language has vanished without a trace, and their burial practices show a puzzling mix of local and foreign elements. Some scholars suggest the Ba may have been a bridge between northern nomads and southern cultures, a forgotten node in the web of early Asian civilization. By the 3rd century BCE, the Ba were gradually absorbed into the growing Qin Empire. There, cities fell silent, and their stories faded from living memory. But fragments endure in bronze echoes, unearthed drums, and half-buried tombs. The Ba may be gone, but their presence lingers just beneath the surface of rivers and mountains that once sang with their voice. The Lulan Kingdom beneath the scorched winds of the Taklamakan Desert. A forgotten kingdom once thrived on the edge of survival, the ancient Lulan Kingdom, situated along the fabled Silk Road. Lulan emerged around 200 BCE as a desert oasis of surprising importance. Traders, envoys, and pilgrims passed through its narrow corridors, linking the empires of Han, China, and Central Asia. It was a land of crossroads where silk met spices, and cultures collided in the shifting sands. But Lulan's fortune was tied to the desert itself. Water from the nevarnished Lop Nura Lake nourished its soil, allowing life to bloom in an unforgiving place. Archaeological excavations have uncovered remnants of timber houses, ancient documents written on wooden slips, and desiccated human remains, hauntingly preserved by the dry air. One of the most enigmatic discoveries, the Lulan Beauty, a remarkably well-preserved mummy whose fine features suggest a mix of Eastern and Western ancestry, raising questions about the region's genetic and cultural complexity. Despite its strategic value, Lulan became a pawn in larger geopolitical games. Caught between the Han dynasty and the Zhongnu Confederation, it was repeatedly occupied, its leaders replaced, its loyalties tested. By the 4th century CE, the kingdom vanished abandoned to sand and time. Climate change and shifting water sources likely sealed its fate. Today, Lulan is a ghost, buried in the desert, its ruins unreachable without great effort, its silence deeper than ever. But each gust of wind over the dunes carries a whisper, that beneath the sand, a lost kingdom still sleeps, waiting to be remembered. The Silla Kingdom, hidden among the misty mountains of the Korean peninsula. The Silla Kingdom rose from obscurity to forge one of the most enduring dynasties in East Asian history. Founded in 57 BCE, Silla began as one of 3 rival kingdoms during Korea's ancient Three Kingdoms period. Isolated by rugged terrain, Silla was once considered the weakest among its neighbors Goguryeo and Baekje. Yet, over the centuries, it evolved into a sophisticated and formidable power. By the 7th century CE, it achieved the unthinkable, unifying most of the Korean peninsula under a centralized rule. With help from Tang China, archaeological evidence reveals a kingdom rich in culture and technological innovation. Intricately crafted golden crowns, unearthed from royal tombs in Jungjutha, ancient Silla capital, speak to the wealth and artistic refinement of its elite. These crowns, adorned with tree-like designs, hint at a deep-rooted tradition blending with Buddhism, which Silla officially adopted in the 6th century. Temples, stone, pagodas, and relics, like the Kiamsiangdae Observatory, the oldest surviving astronomical observatory in East Asia, point to an advanced understanding of science, religion, and governance. Yet, even as Silla flourished, internal strife and noble power struggles began to erode its strength. By the 10th century, the kingdom quietly dissolved, giving rise to the later Goryeo dynasty. Today, The Silla legacy lies buried beneath layers of history, its golden artifacts glittering in museums, its stories etched in stone and myth. But the question lingers: how did a once marginal mountain tribe rise to unify a nation, only to fade so completely from power? The Ugaritan, the wind-swept shores of the eastern Mediterranean, buried beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence, lay the forgotten city of Ugarit, a once thriving hub of trade, diplomacy, and early written language. At its height around 1400 BC, Ugarit was a cosmopolitan port city nestled in what is now modern-day Syria, strategically located between Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and Mesopotamia. Ugarit served as a cultural and commercial crossroads, its markets filled with ivory, copper, wine, and grain. But its true legacy would be written literally in clay. In the late 1920s, archaeologists unearthed a royal archive in the ruins of Ugarit's palace. Inside were thousands of clay tablets written in a unique cuneiform alphabet, now recognized as one of the oldest known alphabets in the world. Unlike the complex pictographic systems of its neighbors, Ugaritic used just 30 symbols to represent sounds. This revolutionary script would influence the development of Phoenician, and eventually, the alphabets we use today. But just as swiftly as it flourished, Ugarit disappeared. Around 1200 BCE, the city was violently destroyed, its palaces reduced to rubble, its people vanished. The culprit remains debated: invaders from the mysterious sea peoples, an internal collapse, or both. The ruins of Ugarit now sit quietly beneath the earth, its secrets whispered in fragments of clay. What other voices, what unwritten truths might still lie waiting in the dust of this forgotten alphabetic empire? The Amorites, they came from the west, nomadic tribes drifting into the heart of Mesopotamia. To the Sumerians, they were outsiders. To history, they became the Amorites, one of the most enigmatic forces to reshape the ancient world. By the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, the Amorites had begun to appear in increasing numbers across Mesopotamia. At first, they were pastoralists, living on the fringes of civilization. But over generations, they assimilated, rose through local ranks, and eventually seized power. They didn't just adopt the culture of the Sumerians and Akkadians, they inherited their cities. Among the most famous Amorite rulers was Hammurabi of Babylon. His code of laws, carved in stone, would become one of the earliest known legal systems. Under Hammurabi's leadership, Babylon rose from a modest city-state to the center of an empire. The Amorites brought more than conquest. They fused tribal traditions with the urban sophistication of Mesopotamia, helping shape the Babylonian identity. Yet their origin remains a matter of speculation. Some suggest they emerged from the deserts of Syria, their language a branch of the early Semitic family. Others believe their rise was linked to larger climate migrations and social shifts that destabilized older city-states. And while the Amorites eventually vanished as a distinct people, their legacy endured in the empires they founded and the laws they left behind. Still, a question lingers: were they merely invaders who adapted to survive, or were they the silent architects behind Mesopotamia's greatest transformation? The Harinsti left no great empire behind, no pyramids, no towering ziggurats. Yet the Harins shaped the course of ancient history from the shadows. Emerging in the highlands of the Near East around 2500 BCE, the Harins were a mysterious, non-Semitic people whose language still puzzles linguists today. They settled in regions spanning from the Zagros Mountains to northern Mesopotamia, forming small kingdoms that would later coalesce into the powerful Mitanni state. Their presence is often glimpsed through fragments: royal treaties, marriage, alliances, mythological texts. The Hurrians served as cultural intermediaries, blending Hittite, Mesopotamian, and Indo-Aryan influences into something uniquely their own. Their pantheon included storm gods and sun deities, and their mythology quietly influenced later traditions, including parts of the Hebrew Bible. But perhaps their most enduring contribution was to warfare. The Mitanni elite were among the first to master the chariot, using it not just for battle, but as a symbol of status and divine favor. Their alliance with Egypt through the marriage of a Hurrian princess to Pharaoh Amenhotep III suggests their influence reached far beyond their rugged homeland. And then, as suddenly as they rose, the Hurrians faded, absorbed by rising empires. Like the Assyrians and Hittites, their language vanished, their cities crumbled, yet their fingerprints remained subtle and scattered, woven into the myths, languages, and politics of a world they helped shape. Who were the Hurrians, really? Wanderers, innovators, or a civilization lost too early for its voice to be fully heard? The Kassitisti ruled Babylon for nearly 4 centuries longer than any other dynasty. Yet the Kassites remain one of the most enigmatic peoples of the ancient world. First emerging in historical records around 1600 BCE, the Kassites arrived from the Zagros Mountains, likely as a tribal confederation with no written language of their own. When Babylon was left vulnerable after the Hittite sack of the city, the Kassites quietly stepped in not as conquerors, but as stabilizers. They didn't burn cities or erase cultures. Instead, they preserved Babylonian traditions while subtly inserting their own identity into the framework of empire. Their legacy lies in their longevity. While great powers rose and fell around them, the Kassites maintained an unusual continuity. They renamed cities, introduced a new pantheon of deities, and reorganized the kingdom into feudal provinces, ruled by local governors loyal to the king. They even introduced the use of the kuduru carved boundary stones that recorded land grants and royal decrees, many of which still survive. Yet for all their influence, the Kassites remain curiously silent. Their language is only partially understood. Their art and architecture are scarce, and when they finally faded from history around 1155 BCE, they left behind little to explain who they truly were. What allowed them to rule for so long, and why have they vanished so completely from the cultural memory of Mesopotamia? The answers lie hidden beneath centuries of dust, waiting for someone to listen. The Mari civilization beneath the arid plains of modern-day Syria lies the forgotten world of Mari, a city once vibrant with culture, politics, and mystery. Discovered in the 1930s near the Euphrates River, Mari revealed over 25,000 clay tablets written in cuneiform. These ancient archives chronicled everything from royal decrees to international diplomacy, offering a rare glimpse into life nearly 4,000 years ago. Unlike many Mesopotamian cities, Mari seemed less focused on conquest and more on alliance, trade, and ceremony. Its palace, sprawling across 6 acres, boasted more than 300 rooms, complete with wall paintings, religious shrines, and administrative chambers. But what makes Mari truly puzzling is its sudden fall. Around 1759 BCE, the city was destroyed by Hammurabi of Babylon, despite prior diplomatic exchanges. Why would a city so deeply connected to its neighbors be reduced to rubble? Was it a political betrayal, or something more internal? Perhaps a shift in belief, or a fracture within the ruling elite. Even today, questions linger. Some tablets hint at divine messages influencing royal decisions. Others reference rituals and omens, suggesting a civilization that blurred the line between governance and mysticism. Mari rose in the desert, thrived in diplomacy, and vanished in fire. And yet, the voices on its clay tablets still whisper, waiting for someone to truly listen. The Ebla kingdom, long before the rise of Babylon, a powerful kingdom, flourished in the heart of ancient Syria. Its name was Ebla, situated near modern-day Idlib. Ebla was one of the earliest known city-states of the ancient Near East, reaching its peak around 2500 BCE when Italian archaeologists uncovered the site in the 1970s. They found more than 17,000 clay tablets buried beneath the ruins of a royal archive, written in a previously unknown Semitic language. The Ebla tablets transformed our understanding of Bronze Age history. These records revealed an advanced bureaucracy, trade routes stretching from Egypt to Mesopotamia, and diplomatic ties with cities like Mari. And your Ebla scribes documented treaties, religious rituals, and even hymns, long before such practices appeared elsewhere in the region. The city's influence was vast, and yet its memory had nearly vanished from history. What happened to Ebla remains unclear. The city was destroyed and rebuilt several times, once possibly by Akkadian forces under Sargon the Great, and again centuries later for reasons still debated. Some scholars suspect shifting alliances or internal collapse. Others point to earthquakes or prolonged drought. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies in the silence that followed. For millennia, Ebla disappeared from maps and memory, until its ancient library spoke again through baked clay. And still, not every tablet has been translated. Not every secret has been told. The Hattians bore, the mighty Hittites, carved their empire into history. There were the Hassians, a mysterious people who left behind no written language of their own, yet shaped the foundations of Anatolian civilization. centered around the ancient city of Hattusa in modern-day Turkey. The Hashans thrived during the early Bronze Age, long before Indo-European tribes arrived. Their culture was distinct, their deities, rituals, and artistic styles unlike anything found in neighboring regions. Though they wrote nothing themselves, traces of their legacy survive in the prayers, myths, and ceremonial texts later recorded by the Hittites, who inherited and adapted much of Hashan religious practice. Hashan society appeared deeply spiritual. Archaeological remains reveal shrines, altars, and artifacts linked to earth goddesses and storm deities. Their art often depicted animals and natural forces, suggesting a worldview rooted in elemental balance. Yet, beyond their religion, little is known. Who were the Hashans? Where did they come from? And where did they go? By the 18th century BCE, their culture was gradually absorbed by the rising Hittites. Whether this was through conquest, integration, or cultural blending remains uncertain. The Hashan language vanished, remembered only in fragments preserved by others. They were a people who left behind no voice, only echoes through the texts of those who followed. And in those echoes, the mystery of the Hassians still lingers, quiet and unresolved. The Phrygians in the rugged highlands of central Anatolia, a forgotten kingdom once echoed with music, myth, and stone. The land of the Phrygians, rising to prominence after the fall of the Hittite Empire around 1200 BCE. The Phrygians built their capital at Gordion, near today's Ankara. Their society blended warrior strength with artistic flourish. Intricate burial mounds, called tumuli, still dot the landscape, most famously the vast tomb believed to belong to King Midas, the ruler of legend said to turn everything he touched to gold. But beyond myth, archaeology reveals a complex culture. Excavations at Gordion uncovered richly crafted furniture, advanced metalwork, and an alphabetic script. The Phrygians also worshipped powerful earth deities, particularly the mother goddess Cybele, and practiced rituals that modern scholars are only beginning to understand. Yet the Phrygians remain elusive. Their language is only partially deciphered, and many of their customs died with them. By the 7th century BCE, the kingdom was ravaged by invading Cimmerians. Though it lingered under Persian, then Roman control, its golden age faded into legend. Even today, the great tomb of Midas remains sealed. Its wooden structure has lasted over 2,700 years, untouched since ancient mourners last walked its corridors. Who were the Phrygians, really? Warriors, musicians, builders, or something more? The answers may lie beneath the mounds of Gordion, still waiting in silence. The Cimmerians, they came from the shadows of the Black Sea, fierce, fast, and nearly invisible in the records of history. The Cimmerians first mentioned in Assyrian texts around the 8th century BCE. The Cimmerians were a nomadic people believed to have originated north of the Caucasus. Pushed by pressure from the expanding Scythians, they surged southward, riding on horseback through the steppes and into the heartlands of Anatolia and the Near East. Unlike settled empires, they left behind no cities, no temples, no written words, only destruction, and fragments of fear etched into the records of those they raided. They overran the once mighty kingdom of Phrygia, possibly bringing an end to the legendary reign of King Midas. Later, they stormed into Lydia, even threatening the borders of Assyria. Yet for all their impact, the Cimmerians remain ghosts. No burial grounds have been definitively linked to them. Their language is unknown. Their origins, still debated. Some historians believe they were others suggest a more complex mix of steppe cultures. What is known, they rode fast, fought brutally, and vanished quickly. By the 6th century BCE, they disappear almost entirely from the historical record, wiped out, absorbed, or simply moved on. Who were they before the raids? And what became of them after the last charge? The silence that follows their story is louder than their war cries, and perhaps even more haunting. The Lydians in the fertile valleys of western Anatolia, between rolling hills and winding rivers, the Lydians carved out a kingdom of wealth, innovation, and enduring mystery. Emerging around the 12th century BCE, the Lydians reached their peak, under the rule of King Croesus, a name still synonymous with unimaginable wealth. According to ancient sources, Lydia was the first civilization to mint coins of pure gold and silver, revolutionizing trade across the ancient world. Their capital, Sardis, dazzled with lavish palaces and marble roads, becoming a hub of commerce and culture between East and West. But beyond gold, The Lydians remain enigmatic. They spoke an Indo-European language, now only partially understood. Their religion, shrouded in fragments, seemed to blend Anatolian earth cults with emerging Greek influence, and while their art and architecture reveal a refined society, much of their written history has been lost, overwritten by Greek and Persian narratives. In 546 BCE, Lydia fell to Cyrus the Great of Persia. Some say Croesus was executed. Others claim he became an advisor in the Persian court. His fate, like so much of Lydian history, is cloaked in contradiction. Today, Sardis lies in ruins. Coins still bear the lion and bull symbol of Lydian power, small, enduring echoes of a kingdom that once defined wealth itself. But what else did the Lydians know or guard? Beneath their legacy of gold lies a story still half buried, waiting to be unearthed. The Colchians, the misty shores of the Black Sea, in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains, lived a people both ancient and elusive. The Colchians, mentioned in Greek mythology as the homeland of Medea and the destination of Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece, Colchis straddled the line between legend and history. But far from mere myth, the Colchians were a real and sophisticated people, inhabiting what is now western Georgia as early as the 2nd millennium BCE. They were known for their mastery of metallurgy. Archaeologists have uncovered finely crafted gold artifacts, tools, and ceremonial items, evidence that the region's mineral wealth was not just mythological fantasy. The Greeks marveled at Colchian knowledge of agriculture, weaving, and especially their tattooed warriors and matriarchal elements, which seemed exotic to the classical world. Yet the Colchians remain difficult to define. Their language has vanished. Their written records, if they existed, have not survived. Even their origins are debated. Some scholars link them to the ancient Hurriya. Others suggest an indigenous Caucasian lineage, distinct from neighboring Indo-European cultures. Despite repeated invasions by Persians, Greeks, and later Romans, the Colchians maintained a unique cultural identity for centuries. And while empires came and went, the mystery of their connection to myth, metal, and magic only deepened. Were they merely the backdrop to a Greek hero's tale, or something far more complex and forgotten? In the land where legends were born, the true story of the Colchians still hides between riverbanks and mountain fog. The Iberians' Caucasus in the highlands of the South Caucasus, nestled between towering peaks and ancient rivers. A kingdom once rose that bridged east and west, the Iberians of the Caucasus, not to be confused with the Iberians of Spain. These were the people of ancient Iberia, a powerful kingdom that thrived in what is now eastern Georgia. By the 4th century BCE, Iberia had emerged as a regional force, with its capital at Mitzkita, a city that would become both a political and spiritual center for centuries to come. The Iberians were skilled in diplomacy, navigating between empires. At times, they aligned with Persia, at others, with Rome or Byzantium. Their society blended indigenous traditions with influences from Zoroastrianism, Hellenism, and eventually Christianity, which they adopted as early as the 4th century CE, making Iberia one of the first Christian kingdoms in the world. But their deeper origins remain unclear. Their language, written in the unique Georgian script that evolved from earlier forms, hints at a rich pre-Christian culture. Yet before the Iberian kingdom's formal rise, archaeology points to a blend of tribal groups, fortified settlements, and ritual sites that suggest a much older identity, one layered in myth and obscured by time. What remains of ancient Iberia is more than just stone ruins and royal chronicles. It is the echo of a people who stood at the crossroads of civilizations, adapting, enduring, and quietly shaping the history of the Caucasus. And still, beneath the hills of Georgia, untouched, tombs and forgotten shrines may yet hold the missing pieces of their story. The Tuanua kingdom in the shadow of the Taurus Mountains, on the southern edge of Anatolia. There once stood a kingdom now nearly erased from memory. The Tuanua kingdom, known primarily through fragmentary Hittite and Neo-Hittite records. Tuanua was one of several successor states that emerged after the collapse of the Hittite Empire around 1200 BCE, located near present-day Tiana in modern Turkey. The kingdom held strategic ground along the vital trade routes that connected Anatolia to Syria and Mesopotamia. Its people spoke Luwian, a hieroglyphic script carved into stone, blending Hittite tradition with local culture. These inscriptions, found on monumental stelae in city gates, speak of kings, deities, and victories, but offer only glimpses into a civilization that stood at the frontier of empires. The rulers of Tuanua maintained a delicate balance, resisting Assyrian domination at times, while cooperating at others. They worshipped a familiar pantheon, storm gods, sun goddesses, and underworld spirits, but adapted their rituals to local landscapes and traditions. Despite its regional influence, Tuanua never rose to imperial heights. By the 8th century BCE, it was absorbed by larger powers, first Assyria, then later by the expanding Persian and Hellenistic realms. Its language faded, its capital crumbled. Today, only scattered ruins and a handful of stone-carved words remain. Who were these mountain kings? What stories did their temples hold? In the dry earth of southern Anatolia, the silent stones of Tuanua still wait, not lost, only unread. The kingdom of Commagene atop a remote mountain in southeastern Anatolia. Colossal stone heads gaze out over the landscape, silent guardians of a forgotten kingdom. Commagene flourishing between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. The kingdom of Commagene was a small but culturally rich realm, nestled between the Roman and Parthian empires. Its rulers claimed descent from both Persian kings and Alexander the Great, blending Greek and Iranian traditions into a unique royal identity. King Antiochus I, the most famous of its monarchs, left behind the kingdom's most striking legacy, the sanctuary atop Mount Nemret. There, amid windswept peaks, he built a vast funerary complex with seated statues of gods, some Persian, some Greek, bearing both names and features from east and west. It was a declaration of divine kingship, carved into stone at the edge of the world. Yet beyond its monuments, Commagene remains elusive. Its cities, like Samosata and Alsamia, were centers of art and astrology, yet much of their knowledge has vanished. The kingdom walked a fine line between powerful neighbors, maintaining independence through diplomacy, marriage, and calculated loyalty, until Rome finally annexed it in 72 CE. Today, the great sanctuary lies in ruins, its statues fractured but still watching. What secrets lie buried beneath Nemret's summit? What truths were once whispered in the twilight between empires? In Commagene, history was carved in stone, but the meaning behind the gaze endures in silence.